The summer of 2005 was the hottest summer that I can remember in my whole life. I've been to Texas, I've lived in Mississippi and Louisiana, but the summer of 2005 in Picayune, Mississippi was the worst. I did band camp that year. I was with the dance team, and so we were practicing our formations for the halftime shows and then for competitions. And before 10 o'clock in the morning, we were all soaked through our clothes, just out on the field, just sweating bullets. So band camp ended, and it was a few weeks before the first day of school, and we start hearing about this hurricane, and it's supposed to be worse than Camille, and I wasn't around for Camille. That was before my lifetime, but apparently it was a pretty big deal. So I lived in this town called Picayune, Mississippi. It's a small, hillbilly, little Mississippi town, very small population. We had a Walmart, and that's where people went after prom. That's what we're working with, people. But we got like 3 hurricanes a year, and so it's like if you leave for every single hurricane, it's like you're going to be gone so much. My grandma used to take us to the casino when there was a hurricane, even like a tropical storm, like any excuse to go to the casino, right? And then we'd stay the night there. But we'd have like 3 hurricanes a year, and we lived in a flood zone at the time. That's where my grandparents owned their house, and it would flood, and obviously school had to be closed because school buses can't just wade through the water and pick kids up. So my best friend Kelly and I would swim in the ditch. And saying this now, it sounds crazy, but at the time when you're like in elementary school and everything's flooded, you put that bathing suit on and you get some 2x4s and you try to learn to ski, right? Like, this is an adventure. Well, I lived in Picayune, and Picayune is 45 minutes away from New Orleans, which is obviously what everyone knows about Katrina. New Orleans got it the worst. We're from New Orleans, and my dad lives in New Orleans. He lived there at the time. So he was going to evacuate to Kansas. And it was kind of a transitional time for us because my mom had just passed away a year before, and then my creepy uncle got out of prison after that, and then my grandpa passed away. And so without the extra income from my grandpa, we had to sell the home, and we had to move to a rental property. So we're in this new space. It's me, my grandma, my great-grandma, who was awesome, and my creepy uncle. And what a time. So my grandma and my great-grandma took a bunch of sleeping pills to just sleep through the storm because we're not leaving for this one, of all the ones. And my uncle and I are just sitting on the porch there, and we lived on this busy highway, and so it was houses on one side and like a foresty, woodsy area on the other side. And we're just sitting on the porch during the storm because what else are we going to do? There's no electricity. Like, we could be inside, sure, but this is more fun. And so we got so much wind. For some hurricanes, depending on where the hurricane is, because it's spinning, it'll like splash you with water. And so it'll dump buckets of water, it'll just flood you out. But if you're on the other side of the hurricane, it'll hit you with the wind. And so we were getting the wind. This was a windy hurricane for us. And so we're sitting on the porch and we're just watching trees fall down. And it's so weird because we live on this busy highway and there's no cars. I mean, obviously nobody's driving during the hurricane, but still it's kind of weird. Like, there's always cars going. One of the biggest things that I remember about the hurricane was the eye of the storm, because the storm, it's like a big circle, and then it gets more and more and more intense in the middle, and then there's the eye of the storm, where there's nothing. And the eye passed right over Picayune, Mississippi, and so it got so bad, and then there was nothing. And it was like you were in a different world. There were no cars, there was nothing. And for having just all of this wind happening and all of this loud noise going on for hours, because the hurricane was moving only like 5 miles an hour. It was a slow-going hurricane. For this eye to be over us and for it to just be so quiet, it was unnatural. So we were walking around in the eye, and anyway, so then the wall of the eye came back, and then the hurricane kind of fizzled out. But we were prepared for this hurricane. We had canned food. We had the bathtub full of water. I think that's to flush the toilet. I'm not really sure why we had a bathtub full of water. And we had a generator. But a few days after the hurricane, we went to go get gas. And I don't know if it was bad planning on our part. We just didn't buy gas, or if we thought we wanted more. It was a long time ago. I don't remember what the circumstances were, but I remember sitting in the back seat of the car, and there were like 40 cars in front of us in a line to get to the gas station. I mean, it had taken us hours. I'd never even been to this place that we were to try to get gas. And we're all at a standstill. And the gas was like $21 a gallon. It was insane. And they ran out of gas before we even got there. So we turn around and we get back to the house. Obviously, we didn't have power. We didn't have any kind of cell phone service. So it was really surprising when my friend Chrissy Franco from school showed up with her grandma at our driveway. Somehow, Chrissy had convinced her grandma that it would be a really good idea for her to stay with me and my family for the rest of this hurricane. And it was cool with everybody else too, so we plugged the generator in, and I had one of those little accordion style closets, and I just took everything out of the closet and I put my TV in there with the little built-in VHS and DVD situation and my Super Nintendo, and we wedged a box fan in there. Chrissy Franco and I are just sitting in there watching old movies and playing Super Nintendo pretty much for the rest of the duration of our electricity being on. Luckily, we lived on the same strip as Walmart, and they have to get Walmart up before anything else, so that people can get water and food and stuff. So we were only out of electricity for like 2 weeks, but most people were out of it for at least 4. So we were very fortunate in that. But after the hurricane, after the water had cleared away from New Orleans, and it looks like you can go back in there. So we're driving to, or rather I'm driving to my dad's house because he's in Kansas. He evacuated. I'm driving to New Orleans, and I'm on a road where you usually go 70 miles an hour, and everyone's going so slow, and it's because there's tombs in the road, because New Orleans is shaped like a fishbowl, and when it floods and fills up, they just kind of, I guess, resurface and drift, and there they are. So cars are driving around tombs on a highway to get to like neighborhoods and stuff. So the first thing I notice is there's these X codes on every house. It's like somebody went through with spray paint and different cans of spray paint, and they're drawing X's and writing little codes and all over the houses. And I have since learned what they mean. It's, the date and time that someone went and looked, the people who went and looked, whether it's the Louisiana State Police or NOPD or whoever it was, any hazards, if there's a downed wire, if there's gas leaks. And then at the bottom is the saddest part, because that's how many bodies are found in the house. And it's just really depressing. Every house had these marks on them. But I got to my dad's house, and I'm looking at it, and you can see where the water was. There's 2 inches of the house, just the very peak of it, that wasn't underwater. Just the whole thing had to be gutted. All of our furniture was gone. There was like other people's stuff in our house. There was brown sludge on everything. Even in the attic, everything's ruined. Our next door neighbors, they had 3 dogs, and so they had to be helicopter rescued off of their roof because they didn't leave for the storm. It was just a wild time, and I obviously live here now because it was such an adventure that I didn't want to do it again. Yeah, it's crazy. They don't even know how many people died in Katrina. The estimates are somewhere between 1,800 and 2,500. And that's just so, it's devastating. It's a terrible thing to have lived through. And it's weird moving to a place like Oregon where it didn't happen, because where I'm from, everybody knows about Katrina. Everyone hates Katrina. And what better way to disrespect somebody than to call her by the wrong name, which is why we called her Katrinka. I didn't forget. Thank you.